Damascus, March 1991. At the Sayyidah Zaynab cemetery, hundreds gathered for a funeral that looked ordinary in every way. The coffin was draped in green cloth. An imam recited prayers. Mourners wept. But none of it was real. This funeral had a purpose: to kill one man, Samir Badreddine, Hezbollah's chief financier in Europe. He believed he was paying respects to a fallen comrade. And yet, the body inside the coffin had been dead for days, poisoned under a Mossad program known internally as Operation Cypress. Before the final prayer ended, death was already wired, waiting for one step too close. Samir Badreddine was born in southern Lebanon in 1952, in a village whose name appears in no strategic assessments. What matters is what he became. The formative moment arrived in September 1982, 3 months after Israeli forces crossed into Lebanon. Badreddine stood in the ruins of a bombed-out apartment building in Beirut's southern suburbs, watching relief workers distribute food purchased with Saudi donations. He understood something his commanders had missed. Wars are won with bullets, but movements survive on money. By age 30, Badreddine had made himself indispensable, not through violence, but through invisibility. He never carried a weapon. Associates described him as methodical, never impulsive. While other Hezbollah operatives studied explosives and small unit tactics, Badreddine mastered European banking regulations and charitable organization statutes. He understood that a transfer flagged by German financial intelligence could destroy a weapons pipeline faster than any airstrike. Operating from cities like Hamburg, Milan, and Brussels, he built networks that moved tens of millions of dollars annually without triggering a single Western intelligence alarm. The method was elegant. Islamic charities with legitimate social programs served as collection points. Front companies provided layering. Cash couriers, often elderly women or students, carried amounts small enough to avoid scrutiny. By the time funds reached Hezbollah accounts in Beirut, the trail had dissolved into 1,000 unremarkable transactions. His behavioral signature made him nearly impossible to target. He avoided phones. He never stayed in one city longer than 72 hours. He appeared only at events where violence was culturally unthinkable. Weddings, religious festivals, funerals. Security services across Europe had assembled fragments of his network. But Badreddine himself remained a ghost. The Bundesnachrichtendienst had photographic confirmation of him in Hamburg twice. DGSE had intercepted a single phone call in 1989. Mossad's file contained 4 confirmed sightings across 6 years. None led to an opportunity. By early 1990, Israeli intelligence assessed that Badreddine's networks were responsible for approximately $40 to $60 million reaching Hezbollah annually. These funds purchased Katyusha rockets fired into northern Israel, trained operatives, deployed to European cells, and sustained infrastructure across southern Lebanon. Killing him would not stop Hezbollah, but it would strangle a financial artery and force reorganization that could take years. The problem was proximity. Every previous interdiction opportunity had failed because Badreddine existed only within circles of absolute trust. Intelligence services had tracked him for 8 years by the time authorization came through. In November 1990, Mossad's planning directorate received a directive coded Aleph 7 Green. The instruction was precise. Neutralize Badreddine within 6 months using methods that minimize diplomatic exposure. No car bombs, no sniper attacks, no operations that could be traced to Israeli soil. The constraint forced innovation. Mossad called this the Trojan ritual strategy. The logic was straightforward. If the target only appears in trusted social contexts, weaponize the context itself. The doctrine had precedent. In 1973, operatives had used a false wedding invitation to position surveillance near a Palestinian logistics coordinator in Rome. In 1986, a fabricated business conference in Cyprus had created proximity to a Hezbollah procurement officer. But those were surveillance operations. This would be execution inside a space designed to exclude violence entirely. The obstacles were layered and unforgiving. First, geography. Damascus was hostile territory saturated with Syrian Mukhabarat surveillance. Any foreign intelligence presence risked immediate compromise. Second, protection. Badreddine moved only within Hezbollah's European networks or among trusted operatives in Syria and Lebanon. His security came not from bodyguards, but from social insularity. Third, optics. A public assassination on Syrian soil risked retaliation across Europe, where Hezbollah maintained dormant cells. Israeli embassies, Jewish community centers, and El Al offices could become targets within hours. Despite these challenges, planners identified a vulnerability: funerals. Hezbollah operatives attended them as a matter of duty and identity. The ritual compressed people into predictable proximity. Bodies were honored, prayers were recited, and suspicion was suspended. Intelligence intercepts confirmed that Badreddine had attended 4 funerals in the past 18 months. 2 in Beirut, 1 in Hamburg, and 1 in Damascus. He always came. He always stood near the coffin. And he always came unarmed. The opportunity clarified in February 1991 when Mossad surveillance units intercepted a low-level courier traveling through the Bekaa Valley toward Damascus. His name does not appear in any operational file that has been declassified. Intelligence analysts designated him Target Alpha 7. He was 31 years old, married, and responsible for transporting documents between Hezbollah cells in Lebanon and Syria. He was not important, but he was functional, and he was expendable in a way that served operational logic. Within 72 hours, all elements would be in position. But first, one critical element needed to be resolved: how to guarantee Badreddine's attendance without triggering his suspicion. The answer came from a Mossad asset embedded within a Damascus-based logistics network that serviced Hezbollah's Syrian operations. The asset, designated Handler 12, had been cultivated over 4 years through financial incentives and carefully managed contact. He had no ideological motivation. He provided information because it paid better than his cover work as a municipal clerk. On February 19, 1991, Handler 12 received instructions through a dead drop in the Souk al-Hamidiyya market. The message was encoded in commercial inventory records. The instruction was simple: identify the next Hezbollah operative scheduled to pass through Damascus, who met 3 criteria: low rank, high mobility, and a clean medical history that would make sudden illness plausible. Target Alpha 7 arrived in Damascus on February 23rd. Surveillance confirmed his check-in at a guest house used by Hezbollah transients near the Sayyidah Zaynab Mosque. He carried a leather satchel, ate alone, and made no phone calls. On the evening of February 24th, he purchased food from a street vendor near the guest house. The food was unremarkable. The vendor was not. The toxin used was a delayed-onset compound derived from a classified program Mossad's Science and Technology Division had been refining since the mid-1980s. The agent, never publicly identified, mimicked cardiac arrest brought on by severe gastric distress. Onset occurred between 36 and 48 hours after ingestion. To a Syrian hospital, it would appear as natural causes: a young man's heart giving out under stress or undiagnosed illness. Target Alpha 7 began showing symptoms on February 26th at approximately 1900 hours. He collapsed in his guest house room. By 22:30 hours, he was dead. Handler 12 ensured the body was logged with municipal authorities under standard protocols. A death certificate was issued citing acute myocardial infarction. The body was placed in a refrigerated morgue pending family notification. Hezbollah's Damascus liaison was informed. Protocol required the body be returned to Lebanon for burial. But Handler 12, working through intermediaries, suggested an alternative. The deceased had no immediate family in Lebanon. He had expressed wishes, according to a fabricated letter, to be buried in Damascus near the shrine of Sayyidah Zaynab, a site of Shia pilgrimage. The story was plausible enough. Hezbollah's Damascus cell accepted it. A funeral was scheduled for March 12th at 1440 hours. Now came infrastructure. The coffin was prepared in a workshop controlled through a Syrian intermediary who believed he was facilitating a smuggling operation, not an assassination. The explosive device was a shaped charge weighing 1.5 kilograms, designed to direct fragmentation laterally within a 3-meter radius while minimizing upward and downward dispersion. The detonator was a radio-controlled trigger operating on a frequency of 462 megahertz with an effective range of 200 meters. The device was sealed beneath the coffin's interior lining, positioned directly under where the deceased's torso would rest. Removing it would require dismantling the entire coffin, something no one would do before a funeral. False identities were layered with surgical precision. The imam who would lead the funeral prayers was a paid asset recruited through a Syrian intermediary with no knowledge of Mossad's involvement. He believed he was being compensated for conducting a service on short notice. Mourners were drawn from genuine religious networks in Damascus, paid small amounts to attend a funeral for a man they did not know. A practice common enough in Islamic funerals where community presence is valued. The burial permit was issued under a forged municipal code stamp, number DMS 4471K, processed through Handler 12's position in the records office. The operational team was compartmentalized into 3 cells. Logistics handled transportation, documentation, and site preparation. Surveillance tracked Badreddine's movements and confirmed his presence in Damascus. The trigger team consisted of 2 operatives positioned to maintain line of sight to the coffin and execute the detonation. No cell knew the full operational picture. If one was compromised, the others could abort without exposure. During the week before execution, one operative experienced what handlers call legend drift. His cover identity was a Lebanese expatriate businessman with family ties to Damascus. He had maintained this identity for 6 months, living in a rented apartment, attending a local mosque, and building superficial relationships with shopkeepers and neighbors. By early March, he found himself thinking in the cadence of his cover story. When he spoke to his handler through encrypted communication, he noticed himself hesitating before using his real name. In the post-operation psychological assessment, analysts noted moderate identity fragmentation requiring a 3-month stand-down period. But the mission continued. Intercepted communications from March 8th reveal Badreddine discussing his daughter's upcoming school examination with an associate in Hamburg. The conversation, flagged by signals intelligence but deemed operationally irrelevant, lasted 4 minutes. Analysts noted nothing of tactical value. Badreddine mentioned his daughter's nervousness about mathematics. He said he had promised to call her after the funeral to hear how she had performed. When the explosion occurred 4 days later, that call was never made. By March 11th, the operation entered its execution phase. A Hezbollah courier confirmed Badreddine's arrival in Damascus 2 days prior. The window was 18 hours, March 12, 1991. 0600 hours, Sayyidah Zaynab Cemetery, southern Damascus. The site was a 4-hectare expanse of white marble tombs and cypress trees, located 2 kilometers from the shrine that gave it sacred significance. Mossad's surveillance team had pre-positioned at 0530 hours in 2 vehicles. A delivery truck parked on Sayyidah Zaynab Street with sight lines to the cemetery's main entrance, and a sedan positioned 300 meters south on a side street providing coverage of the eastern perimeter. Both teams maintained radio silence, communicating only through pre-arranged visual signals using curtain adjustments visible through binoculars. The trigger team arrived separately. The primary operator, designated Unit CAF 21, carried credentials identifying him as a Syrian Ministry of Religious Endowments inspector, conducting routine site evaluations. The backup operator posed as a cemetery groundskeeper, a cover requiring 4 days of prior work to establish visual familiarity with actual staff. Both carried compact transceivers disguised as paging devices. The detonation transmitter was concealed inside a leather-bound Quran, a detail designed to pass visual inspection if questioned. The coffin had been delivered to the cemetery's preparation hall at 0400 hours under standard mortuary transport protocols. Syrian security had no reason to inspect it. The body inside was real. The prayers would be real. The only fabrication was intent. At 0800 hours, the first complication emerged. Syrian Mukhabarat vehicles appeared near the cemetery's northern entrance, likely conducting routine surveillance of a Hezbollah gathering. This was anticipated, but not desired. The trigger team's primary position, designated Position Gamma behind a maintenance shed with direct line of sight to the burial plot, was now potentially visible to Syrian security. Unit CAF 21 relocated to Position Delta, behind a mausoleum wall 40 meters west of the burial site. The angle was less direct, but still within detonation range. At 1300 hours, mourners began arriving. Surveillance logged 23 individuals by 1330 hours, 41 by 1400 hours. Most were genuine. Hezbollah operatives based in Damascus, Syrian contacts, and paid attendees who believed they were fulfilling a religious duty. The fabricated imam arrived at 1345 hours, reviewing his notes with the solemnity expected of the role. At 1400 hours, a second complication. Signal interference disrupted the detonator test. Unit CAF 21 attempted a diagnostic pulse at 1355 hours as a final systems check. The receiver inside the coffin failed to acknowledge. Electromagnetic interference from Syrian security communications equipment operating on overlapping frequencies was degrading the signal. The backup frequency, 458 MHz, was tested. Acknowledgement received. The mission continued, now operating on a secondary channel with reduced margin for error. Badreddine entered the cemetery at 1437 hours. Surveillance confirmed visual identification through telephoto observation. He was flanked by 6 Hezbollah operatives, all known to Israeli intelligence. He wore a dark suit, no visible body armor, no weapon. In his right hand, he carried a string of prayer beads, tasbih, a common accessory. His movements were deliberate, unhurried. He greeted 2 operatives near the entrance with brief embraces. He walked toward the gathering with the posture of a man fulfilling an obligation he had performed many times before. What Badreddine did not know was that every element around him had been arranged. The mourners he recognized were real. The ones he did not recognize were paid. The imam was hired. The coffin was wired. And 40 meters away, behind a mausoleum wall, Unit CAF 21 held a transmitter disguised as a holy text, waiting for visual confirmation and proximity. At 1441 hours, the imam began the final prayer, Salat al-Janazah. The ritual requires participants to stand in rows facing the coffin. Badreddine moved to the front row as seniority and respect dictated. He stood 3 meters from the coffin. The prayer consists of 4 takbirs, 4 declarations of God's greatness. During the first takbir, Badreddine remained stationary. During the second, he stepped forward slightly. Tradition encourages proximity to the deceased as a sign of honor. During the third takbir, Badreddine placed his left hand on the coffin's edge. The gesture was intimate and automatic. It is how mourners physically acknowledge the dead. His fingers rested on the green cloth. 6 other Hezbollah operatives stood within the lethal radius, their attention on the prayers, not the coffin beneath their hands. Unit CAF 21 confirmed visual identification through binoculars marked with the designation CAF 21. The angle was sufficient. The distance was 190 meters. The backup operator maintained overwatch on Syrian security, confirming no immediate approach. The transmitter was activated. The signal was sent at 14:42 hours and 17 seconds. The explosion was contained, but catastrophic. The shaped charge detonated with a velocity of 7,000 meters per second, directing fragmentation laterally through the coffin's wooden frame. The structure disintegrated. Metal fragments, wood splinters, and explosive pressure radiated outward in a 3-meter sphere. Badreddine absorbed the primary impact. His body was thrown backward 1.2 meters. Death was instantaneous, caused by catastrophic thoracic and cranial trauma. The 6 operatives standing within proximity suffered similar fates. Secondary casualties included 4 mourners outside the primary kill radius who sustained fragmentation injuries. Total fatalities: 7. Elapsed time from detonation to silence: 4 seconds. Panic followed physics. Mourners fled in all directions. Screaming began. The imam, standing outside the blast radius, dropped to the ground. Syrian security personnel reached the site within 90 seconds, weapons drawn, scanning for secondary threats. They found none. The cemetery descended into controlled chaos. Security cordons established, bodies identified, survivors questioned. 200 meters away, Unit CAF 21 disassembled the transmitter, placing components into separate bags. The Quran casing was left intact and placed on a nearby grave, a detail designed to appear abandoned by a fleeing mourner. Both operators exited the cemetery through separate routes, maintaining the behaviors of panicked bystanders. By 14:55 hours, both had reached extraction vehicles positioned in pre-surveyed locations. By 1600 hours, both had crossed into Lebanon through a border route controlled by assets paid to ignore specific vehicles during specific windows. There were no Mossad casualties, no arrests, no immediate attribution, only 7 bodies, a destroyed coffin, and the beginning of questions that would paralyze Hezbollah's financial operations for months. By 1630 hours, Syrian Mukhabarat had sealed the cemetery and begun forensic examination. The explosive residue signature indicated a shaped charge consistent with military-grade engineering, not improvised devices used by local militants. The detonation pattern, lateral fragmentation, minimal ground cratering, suggested professional design. The radio-controlled triggering mechanism, partially recovered from coffin debris, indicated remote operation. Syrian intelligence concluded within hours that this was not a Hezbollah internal dispute, not a Syrian betrayal, and not a random act of violence. The sophistication pointed to state-level capability. Hezbollah's initial response was confusion. Commanders in Beirut received fragmented reports: an explosion at a funeral, Badreddine dead, 6 operatives dead. Damascus contacts suggested Israeli airstrike, but there had been no aircraft. Others suspected Syrian intelligence eliminating Hezbollah elements deemed too independent. Accusations spread internally. How had security failed at a funeral? Who had vouched for the imam? Why had the coffin not been inspected? By March 14th, Hezbollah's leadership issued a public statement blaming Israel for a cowardly attack on mourners. Privately, internal audits began. Financial networks across Europe froze as operatives awaited instructions. Loyalty checks paralyzed decision-making. Fundraising contacts went silent, fearing surveillance or infiltration. The uncertainty was precisely the strategic outcome Mossad had engineered. Removing Badreddine eliminated one financier. Injecting paranoia into Hezbollah's most trusted rituals disrupted the entire system. Intelligence gained from the operation extended beyond the immediate kill. Surveillance during the funeral identified 17 Hezbollah operatives whose faces were photographed and added to active target databases. Communications intercepts in the days following the attack revealed internal disputes about security protocols, providing insight into command structure and decision-making hierarchies. Hezbollah's European networks remained degraded for approximately 8 months, while new financial architectures were constructed with increased compartmentalization. The diplomatic cost was manageable. Syria issued formal condemnations but took no retaliatory action. Damascus understood the game. Israeli operations on Syrian soil were violations, but escalation risked broader conflict neither side wanted. Hezbollah threatened retaliation but executed none immediately. The ambiguity of the attack, no claim of responsibility, no clear evidence trail, made proportional response difficult to calibrate. Operationally, the mission revealed a tradecraft vulnerability. The use of a fabricated funeral exposed the method itself. Hezbollah adapted by implementing mandatory security sweeps at all religious gatherings, including funerals. Attendance at such events dropped as operatives calculated risk differently. Coffins were inspected. Imams were vetted through multiple sources. The sacred space had been compromised, and it could not be reclaimed. For the individuals involved, consequences varied. Unit CAF 21 completed a standard psychological debrief and returned to active duty after a mandated 6-month rest period. The backup operator requested reassignment to non-operational roles, citing accumulated stress. Handler 12 continued providing information for another 2 years before his cover was compromised in an unrelated matter. He was extracted to Israel in 1993 and resettled under a new identity. The Syrian intermediary who facilitated the coffin preparation disappeared in late 1991, circumstances unknown. The human cost extended beyond operational accounting. Badreddine's widow received notification through Hezbollah channels. She had been expecting his call about their daughter's examination. Instead, she received a body prepared for burial and an explanation that satisfied no one. The 6 Hezbollah operatives killed alongside him left families who attended funerals wondering if the coffins before them concealed the same invisible threat. Trust, once automatic, became conditional. Mossad's internal assessment concluded that tactical objectives were fully achieved. Badreddine was eliminated. Financial networks were disrupted. Psychological impact exceeded projections. Strategic objectives were partially achieved. Hezbollah adapted, decentralizing finances further and making future tracking more difficult. The organization did not collapse. Violence did not stop. But operations slowed, and reorganization consumed resources that might have been directed elsewhere. The operation became a case study within intelligence communities worldwide, though never publicly acknowledged by Israel. The lesson was not the explosive device or the radio trigger. Those were engineering problems with known solutions. The lesson was psychological. Social rituals exist because they suspend suspicion. Funerals, weddings, religious gatherings. These are spaces where human beings lower defenses because the context demands it. Weaponizing that suspension of suspicion achieves tactical success, but alters the landscape permanently. After Operation Cypress, Hezbollah operatives attended funerals differently. They stood farther from coffins. They questioned imams. They calculated risk where grief should have been uncomplicated. Was this precision deterrence or the corruption of sacred space? From one perspective, Mossad removed a Financier funding attacks against Israeli civilians without bombing a city block or launching a missile. Collateral damage was limited to those willingly standing within Hezbollah's operational circle. The method prevented greater violence by disrupting funding pipelines and demonstrating reach. From another perspective, the operation weaponized trust itself, turning mourning into a tactical vulnerability and ensuring that nothing, no ritual, no tradition, no moment of grief, could remain insulated from intelligence warfare. The question is not whether the operation succeeded. The forensic evidence is clear. 7 men died. Financial networks collapsed. Strategic objectives were achieved. The question is, what gets lost when the methods of intelligence work erase the boundaries between combatant and mourner, between operational space and sacred ground? When agencies demonstrate that funerals can be weapons, they may prevent specific attacks, but they also guarantee that paranoia becomes permanent, that trust becomes tactical liability, and that every gathering of human beings in grief becomes a potential kill zone. What is your perspective on weaponizing social rituals in intelligence operations? Is the temporary disruption of an organization's financial networks worth the permanent erosion of spaces designed to exist outside violence? Does removing one financier justify teaching an entire organization that even funerals require threat assessment? The answer reveals whether you believe intelligence work operates under different moral physics than ordinary human interaction, or whether some boundaries, once crossed, cannot be reclaimed. If this operation made you reconsider where the line between security and sanctity should be drawn, share your thoughts. If you believe the strategic calculus justifies the method, or if you believe some spaces must remain off-limits regardless of tactical advantage, drop your perspective in the comments. And if you made it this far into a story about turning a funeral into an assassination, hit that like button, because understanding how intelligence agencies think is the first step in deciding whether their logic should govern the world we live in.